And to talk about the ongoing economic situation and plans to work with the IMF to figure out a way out of this economic crisis, I've invited to our studios to discuss about government plans and what suggestions the main opposition has for the government going forward. I've invited to our studios parliamentarian of the Samagi Jana Balawegaya, Eran Wickramaratne. Very good evening and thank you for making time to be here.
Good evening.
It looks like the former Prime Minister asked for a debate on the IMF report, and the government says they will go in for a debate, and it looks like the government has a lot of interest to work together with the opposition as well as other parties. But the Samagi Jana Balawegaya takes a back step here. Are you avoiding the people's requirements, trying to help the government find out a solution at this moment, because we see economic experts with the SJB already?
The idea that we are not cooperating with the government should be completely debunked. That's not true at all. We have played our role in the opposition, not now. For more than a year, we have been bringing to the attention of the government what we think are the problems in their policy and in their management. Policy and management, these are the two big weaknesses the government has had. It's fallen on deaf ears for a long time, and basically nobody has been paying any attention. In fact, even the finance minister hasn't even been in parliament since December 10th, even to answer a question on the economy. Now, if the government actually and seriously is looking for engaging the opposition, I think we should do it in Parliament. Parliament often in the public's eye is basically the chamber and debating, but Parliament is a lot more than that. Parliament has several committees. It has the Public Finance Committee, it has Committee on Public Accounts, it has Committee on Public Enterprises, and there are other mechanisms in Parliament. And the reason I say that we should do it in Parliament is we don't want the government to basically take advantage in any way, right, like it has done in the past.
But how do you think the government could take advantage of a situation where you need to put the people's requirements first? You blame the government for the current crisis, but isn't it the duty and responsibility of the opposition to play a part when the government has opened the platform for you?
The government hasn't. Actually, what this president has done, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, since he came into office, right, he has strengthened himself, he has strengthened the executive, the presidency at the expense of parliament. Even members of the cabinet will tell you, even their powers have been weaned. The 20th amendment was one way that he did it. He basically took on more and more powers to himself. What has he done? He has appointed presidential commissions, task forces, committees, and is working outside the constitutional and parliamentary process. The all-party conference is also another step in that same direction. We are telling him openly, if you are serious, you come to Parliament, bring your finance minister to Parliament, we will constructively engage, and what we have been saying for a year, we can talk about the details of it and see how it could be implemented.
Now the government says when Parliament meets in the first week of April, they will have a debate on the IMF report. But essentially, what concerns do you have about the IMF report? The policy is already taken by the central. The central bank too says they've engaged and taken corrective measures so far in line with IMF suggestions and recommendations. The IMF too commends the government for certain measures taken so far. So what is your view as an economist?
Yeah, so I think the first thing I would want to say is that we welcome a parliamentary debate, but the issue is not about debates anymore. The issue is about the government changing its ridiculous policies. We don't need to say what hardships people are going through. The basics, the fundamental things are not provided to the people, right? Before this government came into office, did you ever hear of macroeconomic instability? Did you hear about power cuts, gas shortages, electricity cuts, petrol queues? Did you hear of any of this? You haven't. And the reason is because they have mismanaged the macroeconomy. You know, managing the macroeconomy is very, very fundamental, and this government has really messed it up. How did it do it? It started with basically unscientific approach to the whole thing. They came in and just cut taxes. Government revenues fell by one-third. One-third government revenues just fell by, right? This is the only country basically in Asia, right, that even the reserves have gone down. The reserves from 2019 to 2021, in 2 years, the Sri Lankan reserves went from $7.6 billion by 80% down. Every country in Asia, including the three giants, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, in South Asia, all the countries of Southeast Asia, the smaller countries in South Asia, even Bhutan, Nepal, Maldives, every country has increased basically their reserves. So this hiding behind the COVID pandemic doesn't help. It's wrong policies and complete mismanagement. You refer to the central bank, right? What has the central bank done? The central bank has followed a monetary policy which has been dictated by fiscal policy. A central bank of a country must be independent. It has two main responsibilities. One is financial sector stability and the other is inflation. It has failed on both those counts, the central bank of Sri Lanka.
When we talk about the current government's period in power, since the COVID-19 hit the country's economy, we see the IMF also raising concern about the current global shortages and how global oil prices are harming the global economy. At the same time, Europe and the USA sees supply shortages, creating inflationary risks and other problems to their economies. But again, Sri Lanka, a small economy, and we've had policy issues and mismatch in economic management over the years. At the same time, don't you think now you should get together to come up with a solution?
You were referring to inflation. You were referring to increases in prices. The inflation in this country is probably the highest in the world. When we talked of inflation, normally we talked about 5% or 10% of inflation. That's what we normally talked about. What are we talking about? From a pound of bread, whether it's lentils, whether it's rice, whether it's salmon tins, whatever you talk about, right? I'm not even talking about fuel and things like that. We are not talking of 5 and 10%, 50%, 100%, 200%. It's stagflation. Who is responsible for this? This is the highest in the world, the inflation, right? No other country has this. So trying to hide behind this doesn't help. And the reason is because the central bank hasn't taken responsibility. If the central bank followed an independent monetary policy and it had used the tools that it had, it has certainly got inflation much more under control. There are two reasons for inflation. I grant one. There are international reasons. International prices grow up, it affects our local inflation. But that's not the only reason. Sri Lanka's stagflation is not only related to international prices. That is why during our period, Mangala Samaravira and I brought a fuel price formula, because we were conscious of the macroeconomy. We were conscious of inflation being imported. But our inflation is not only that. Our inflation is because the central bank also pursued a policy of expanding, printing money, and they were defending it by trying to use new theories. What kind of nonsense is that?
What do you recommend now that the government does? What immediate measures do you expect the government to take? The rupee has been floated, tightening of monetary policy measures have been taken, but what now other than engaging with the IMF?
India, I would like to ask you a question. If you had your company mismanaged, what is the first thing you would do? Would you be talking about policy? Or would you be looking at the management? You're asking me my recommendation. The first thing I would suggest is that in the top team that the government is handling this crisis, there has to be changes. Some of those people need to be removed because they have pursued a policy, they have mismanaged the country's economy, they have put ordinary people in trouble. Some of those people need to be removed. That's the first thing you do. After you have done that thing, confidence will build up. Financial markets and the economy works on confidence. Confidence will build up. Then we can look at an independent central bank, and they can use interest rates as a way in which they can basically control inflation. We can look at the reforms that are needed in independent central banks, to bring the Monetary Law Act into place. We can look at basically the state-owned enterprises, and we can look at that. We can look at expenditures. This government's expenditures. One family has controlled 65% of the budget of this country. Not only that, so lots of people won't say these things that I'm saying. Expenditures. During the COVID crisis, Sri Lanka is probably the only country in Asia where even defense expenditures have gone up, whereas other countries increased welfare expenditures. So there are so many different things that need to be done. But first I think you have to have new people managing it so that those policies could be implemented.